So good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Leonard Lee. I'm the Deputy Director of the Lloyd's Register Foundation Institute for the Public Understanding of Risk. I'm also on the faculty of NUS Business School. So this afternoon, it's my great pleasure to introduce our speaker for our public lecture, right? We have with us Dr. O Jiaqing from the Aberystwyth University. So a few words about OJ, right? Short for Jiaqing, right? So before joining Aberystwyth University, which is actually in Wales, the UK, he did a postdoc at SMU, and before that, he actually held a couple of positions at NTU as well as SIT. So something that you might not know is that he's actually a Singaporean, and he did his undergrad in psychology with the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences at NUS. And it is also notable that he was the recipient of the first class honors in his cohort when there were only 2 people who actually got the first class honors that year, right? So OJ's work lies at the intersection of psychology and healthcare, and he has done a lot of interesting work, particularly in the area of evolutionary psychology. And he's certainly not a stranger to lots of awards and grants that he has actually garnered over the years. So this afternoon, so we're very honored to have him to share with us some of his research. And in particular, he's going to tell us a little bit more about why living in urban cities might not be the best thing for your health. So with that, let me turn the floor over to OJ, who is going to tell us much more about this topic. OJ, please.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thanks a lot, Prof. Lee, for a very kind sort of introduction. Thanks a lot. So firstly, I will share my screen first. Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about, as what Prof. Lee has said, whether it is healthy when we are living in a sort of urban city. Okay, so before we, I guess, talk about the details of it, I would like to maybe do a short sort of activity with everybody here. So I would like you to think for just a short period of time. Imagine this is the sort of image that you will have here in front of you. And I'm going to use this image. I'm going to propose to use this image as a big sort of giant size poster in your bedroom. How will you feel? Like, will you feel sort of comfortable, happy, or maybe not? And also, I'm going to just show you a quick video. Can be a bit loud, okay? Just a short one.
So OJ, we can't see the video, so I think you may have to unshare the screen and share it again, maybe. Or you need to share the video.
So can everybody see it? Not really.
No, I think you might have to
to share the video as well, okay.
Yeah, so you need to unshare, and then I think when you share the video, there is a box that you have to click to optimize the sharing, for videos and audio.
Okay, so I have to stop sharing this one first. I'll share the video. Okay. Thanks a lot for pointing that out. So I'll stop sharing this one. Sorry, do bear with me with this one, with the video, all right? Okay, here in this one. Okay, so how do you feel about sort of having that sort of video in front of you? How do you feel when you look at that sort of short video? I'm gonna show you another one now, which is from this one. I'm gonna share the screen again, so do bear with me with that.
This device has come to be known in our club as the magic binocular. Focus. This is the zoom. When that zoom travel goes less than 90 degrees.
Okay, so this is the other video. So how do you feel about looking at that video instead? So which one do you prefer? Like this is the alternative sort of image that I'm proposing for your poster. So which one do you prefer then? Is this something that well, I guess like do you feel differently in you when you look at this image as opposed to the previous one, and this video as opposed to the previous one as well? So which one do you prefer, and why is that the case, or why not? I'm gonna just do a quick poll with everybody and see what are your thoughts. I can imagine maybe some of you might not be able to see it, so I have to stop sharing this and share that screen instead with that preference. So if you can go to this website, www.menti.com, use the code, and you can just choose one of the three options. So do you prefer the city view with the city video, or the nature view with the nature video, or you prefer neither because you actually have a giant size poster of yourself and an hour-long video of yourself instead? I mean, maybe it's entirely possible now with TikTok. I'm not really into TikTok, but I can imagine maybe you can break up the videos into like different chunks or something. But so which one would you prefer as a poster maybe, or something you're playing in the background? So it seems that a lot of people are choosing the nature view and video. So far, nobody has got the giant size of poster of self. I'm just gonna like so leave it for like the next 20 or 30 seconds because of I just want to give everybody a chance to obviously respond, but at the same time, obviously, I'm conscious about the amount of time we have got. So we just give another sort of 10 seconds, perhaps. I mean, feel free to let me know as well. I mean, after the talk, if you didn't have a chance to maybe respond to this. Okay, it seems that I think is a overwhelming is an overwhelming sort of a response here that everyone, I guess, who has responded so far has preferred the nature video and the nature poster for your bedroom. So rather than the one with the city view. So why is this the case then? So I think one of the, obviously there are many sort of explanation and reasons why this is the case, but I will introduce this concept of evolutionary mismatch today to try to help us explain why that's the case. And I was also dealt with how the idea about evolutionary mismatch might affect us on a micro level and or to the macro level as well in terms of urban living, and how is it going to affect our physical and mental health risk. And we will also discuss about whether it's all doom and gloom. Is that all negative, or is that the possibility that there may be some benefits as well, obviously living in a city. And also I will just do very briefly, obviously, about some ways, not comprehensively, but some ways to address such health risks. And I'll then obviously sum up the talk. So firstly, what is evolutionary mismatch? So simply put, it's a concept very popular in biological sciences and increasingly in behavioral sciences that talks about potential sort of conflict between our evolved psychological mechanism and biological mechanism, and the way our life has changed drastically in the last 100, 200 years or so, to the point that it might be very sort of evolutionary unnatural. And with that kind of conflict, there's higher risk that we might then encounter a lot of challenges to our well-being in terms of both physical and mental well-being. So it's a concept that allows us to maybe understand why something might happen. So rather than just perhaps like saying the how. So if, for instance, if I ask you, where would you prefer to go for a holiday, to take a sort of the break or vacation? Like usually people want to go maybe to the beach, right? So, and to unwind or do something like that, right? So to get close to sort of nature. You might want to go to a place like this, maybe to do your shopping, to maybe have a bit of sort of like a party or enjoyment. Obviously, after the pandemic's over, right? So I mean, you're probably not going to see a scene like this very frequently here. I mean, at this point in time, isn't it? So, but after the pandemic's over, so so the evolutionary mismatch can try to sort of explain the why. So why we more in tune towards scenes like this rather than this? The reason is because we are all more attuned. We have evolved to prefer such views. And research finding has suggested that obviously we feel sort of better sort of when we are sort of closer to natural environment and things like that, and where things we are more evolved to be sort of adapted to. But at the same time, of course, because we have also evolved together with a lot of variety of other things as human beings, we have evolved a level of intelligence as well. So we're able to sort of harness our level of intelligence to somehow sort of as what biologists would use the concept called biohack. We can use our intelligence to somehow modify sort of our environment to a certain extent that it reduces sort of the mismatch. So that is what we can possibly do, and perhaps that's something that we can consider as well in public health. I will also drive home a couple of other examples to illustrate the concept of evolutionary mismatch further. But before I carry on, before I show you the next image, I would just want to provide a sort of a bit of a warning, because the image I'm going to show you later on, the next is an image of a cockroach. So if you have a phobia of a cockroach, maybe you just want to look away, okay? So it's not going to be a very nice image, okay? Just in case someone has some huge phobia of cockroaches, sorry. Okay, so if you can look at this sort of image of a cockroach, how do you feel about this image? Like chances are, if I would suggest that would you want to sort of maybe like kiss the image? Hopefully not, right? You're not going to do that, of course, because our computer screen is probably not the cleanest. I mean, we might be cleaning it like quite often now, because especially because of the pandemic. But maybe you don't want to do that. But imagine, like, if I sort of suggest that, okay, if you're going to go close to the image, you might find it, I guess, a bit uncomfortable, right? I guess a lot of people will find it uncomfortable. So I reckon that not a lot of people will want to use this image as maybe a giant size poster. You probably prefer that city poster rather than this one as well, right? So why is that the case? Despite the fact that this is just an image on a computer, the very fact that you and I know, like, this is not real, right? I mean, well, I guess obviously the cockroach might be real, but the image itself is not real, but we still respond as if the cockroach is just in front of us. Similarly, we also respond emotionally when we watch, like, say a Korean drama or a Hollywood movie as well, emotionally as well, despite the fact that we might know, like, the Korean actor or actress or whoever it is, like Tom Hanks or whoever it is they're just acting, right? They're not really being cute in that instance, right? So why are we feeling emotional? Why are we crying? The reason is because from evolution mismatch perspective, we humans, we have not evolved to sort of, well, I guess, deal with an image on a computer. Well, I mean, we have got the intelligence to understand, to appreciate that this is an image that's not real, of course. But at the same time, we respond emotionally as well, because we have evolved those emotional responses to something like that, something that doesn't look nice, because obviously a cockroach would, having the fear again towards the cockroach would be adaptive, right? In the prehistoric past, even in the modern day as well, because if the cockroach is crawling on your food, you probably won't want to eat it, because then you might fall sick. So it is an evolved, healthy, actually, tendency to feel somewhat fearful of a cockroach. But in this case, it's, well, I guess, misadjusted, right? Isn't it? Because it's just an image. We don't have to feel fear to the image, but we still do so because of evolutionary mismatch. And for those of you who are afraid of cockroaches, we are past that image now, so you can look at the screen again, just in case. Okay. Another example, like just quick example. Have you ever experienced jet lag? Of course, we can't really fly to like different places now because of the pandemic, but maybe before the pandemic, we might have experiences, maybe flying to a different country, right? So, and many of us will have experienced jet lag depending on where you go. Like if you have flown to, like, say, for instance, from Singapore to the US, you probably will have experienced like severe jet lag. You will have told your friends, oh my God, I feel really unwell. And you feel those symptoms, classic symptoms of jet lag, maybe stomach upset, feeling lethargic during the day, finding it difficult to fall asleep as well, and just a general sense of uncomfortable or being in discomfort, right? The just sense of discomfort. So why is that the case? Evolution mismatch can also explain it as well. So if you ask people, people might be saying that someone like, why is that the case? But someone might just respond saying that, oh, because I've traveled long distances. So the answer is yes and no. Because if I can give you an example, like say if you fly from Singapore to Aberystwyth, which is a city in Russia today, which is about 5,000 to 6,000 kilometers away, it takes you about like what, a day or so or more, right? So you will feel tired as well when you reach Aberystwyth. However, chances are, I would like to guess, chances are you're not going to feel the full suite of like jet lag symptoms, mainly because the time zone are the same. Like in Aberystwyth in Russia and Singapore, their time zone are the same. However, if you travel now here from over in Singapore, of course, like I'm not in Singapore, like so over in Singapore to Jakarta in Indonesia, which is less than 1,000 kilometers away, you still feel some symptoms of jet lag. I will bet, because there's a time difference. There's 1 hour time difference between Singapore and Jakarta. So you probably feel a bit uncomfortable for just 1 day. So usually the idea is like you rest 1 day for 1 hour of time difference. So the reason is because, of course, from evolution mismatch perspective, we have never in our much of our evolution history have never got a chance to move to a different time zone, right? I mean, the hunter-gatherers, ancestors, our ancestors, right, did not really get a chance to, I guess, fly to a different place. Planes or trains or cars were not invented then. It only was something evolution novel in the last 200 plus years or so, right? And also because we had never traveled in a plane, we had never experienced also like the environment in a plane as well, the cabin pressure and so on, right? Or sitting for long hours inside the plane as well. So these are all the things that are evolution novel, and that is why it produces so health effects in us because of the mismatch. Okay, so with that in mind, the next question is then to understand how would all these then affect you living in an urbanized world? Are there things that are in an urbanized world, they are more pronounced as compared to, say, maybe someone living in a rural area? And if so, how is it going to affect us? So I'm going to ask a series of questions. Like you don't obviously have to answer. You don't have to like sort of type your responses in here, but you can maybe think about it yourself. It's more like a thought experiment, and then as we go along, all right? So the first is, are you living alone? Or are you living in a multi-generation household? The reason why I'm asking is that research finding has shown that prior to industrialization, there's pretty much no cases of people living alone at all. industrialization, there's a gradual increase in people living alone. And in fact, a recent report on European countries has found that around 1 in 3 people are living alone in European countries on a whole. And even in Singapore, the Department of Statistics have found that in 2020, there's about 16 people living alone in Singapore. And this has got to do with the concept of evolutionary mismatch, because in the research studies, anthropological research studies have suggested that people in the prehistoric past has never really lived alone. So on average, they look at studies on modern hunter-gatherer societies. On average, people live together with usually their relatives, their affinal kin, and their close friends, with groups about 30, numbering 30 or so. So it's a very sort of different sort of living environment as compared to maybe the modern world, right? So where we are sort of living alone. And also because when people are living in those contexts in the prehistoric past, they're also living with different generations as well. And research studies also suggested, and also there's a theoretical understanding to that as well, where actually when there is age-dependent effect when people are living together with people from different generations. So they found that in general, usually people who are older tends to sleep earlier and then wake up earlier. And when people are sort of younger, they tend to sort of sleep later and then wake up later. So, and they found that among hunter-gatherer society, modern hunter-gatherer society, and they suggest that that's probably the case as well in the prehistoric past. There's usually not a time when there's someone who's not awake. So most of the time, there's always someone who's awake. So that provides a form of vigilance as well. So if you are sort of living alone, it's kind of an evolutionary mismatch thing in the modern world. And that's when you become more vigilant about your surroundings, because obviously if you're just living alone, then you're more concerned about the sound maybe coming out from outside your house, right? But if you're living with maybe 4 other siblings, maybe you have got like a few brothers like who are like maybe black belt in Taekwondo or something, they'll be like, they'll sort it out, don't worry. So that affects a lot of health issues, and research finding has suggested it affects things like insomnia, and also in terms of like other issues like sort of like your stress level as well, which has implication for a variety of mental health issues as well. So the next question is, do you usually order food online? I think a lot of us will say yes because of the pandemic, right? Or we probably have to be in a lockdown or some form of like restriction. So you probably order food online more often than maybe in the past. But do you usually do that, or do you do more like home cooking? And what type of food do you usually order? And how much do you move around per day? So the reason why I'm asking this is also because from an evolution perspective, we don't usually, well, I mean, people in the prehistoric past do not actually have the chance to, obviously there's no like Deliveroo or Grab or anything like that in the prehistoric past, right? So, and at the same time, research finding has also suggested that the nature of many takeaway food in general are quite different from home cooked food. So a lot of takeaway food tends to be higher in trans fat, saturated fat, sodium, cholesterol, and also lower in dietary fiber. I mean, factors that are very important for well-being and physical well-being especially. And research finding has also suggested that takeaway food, especially with those companies, like when you use those apps, they tend to promote those unhealthier food more than the healthier ones. So like usually there's some promotion with like say maybe a pizza or something like that, rather than maybe say let's buy this salad something. And so because this is then in conflict with our sort of evolved tendency, because in the prehistoric past we have this evolved preferences for sweet and sugary food and food that are high in fat content, because there are far and few in between, because you never really know when it's going to be your next meal. So if you manage to find maybe like say maybe a goat to eat, for instance, chances are you're going to survive more for the next month or so, rather than someone who's maybe only feasting on like maybe the vegetables you can find. So we have evolved this preference for sugary, fatty food. But in the modern day, these are widely accessible because of the app, because of the takeaway food. So we are consuming them in excess, but our body are not built for that kind of excessive consumption of this type of food, right? So we got to experience a lot of health effect because of that. Similarly, because our world are so different now, we could just sit back and relax, maybe watching Netflix and maybe having that takeaway food in front of us, just waiting for them to deliver. We don't even have to go around hunting for food. And this is in contrast to the sort of evolved sort of tendency of like our prehistoric ancestors, who on average, as research and anthropological research findings would suggest, we walk about, say, 10 kilometers per day. And so, and even when they actually rest, like those hunter-gatherers, when they actually rest, they don't actually sit down because there wasn't really like chairs, but they actually were like squatting down. And a lot of like physical sports scientists, they have found that the process of like squatting down is actually very sort of energy draining. Like, so you can try, like I've tried it before and it is quite hard actually. So like if you try to squat down for like maybe 1 hour, half an hour, it's actually sort of a muscle building exercise actually as well. So it's very different from the kind of lifestyle we are probably living in our urbanized world, right? So sitting back on the couch, enjoying maybe the food, and also maybe like watching television. So research finding has suggested because of all this, there are numerous of adverse health effects that might affect us. Because of this, the diet and the lifestyle, you might increase our chances, our risk of developing metabolic diseases, a risk of developing a lot of, say, musculoskeletal condition as well, because we're not moving around that much as well. And also a risk of developing like cardiovascular and also stroke risk because of the diet and also the lack of physical activity. So the next one is like, how much time do you usually spend on a screen, and in particular, social media platform? I guess also because of the pandemic, we can say that we do spend a lot of time. Even now, right? You're listening to this talk, you're actually looking at the screen. And also with social media platforms as well, how much time do we usually spend? I think it's quite a lot, because from what I understand with the statistics in Singapore, with the data from the Department of Statistics conducted last year, the mobile phone penetration rate is like 150. So it's like there's more than I guess that there are people with more than one mobile phone, so to speak. So that's what it meant. So we have a lot of devices around us, right? We're looking at the screen all the time. So is there also like an evolution mismatch then in this context? So there are two folds to it. Like, so one is that, of course, we are not evolved biologically and psychologically to be looking at the screen all the time. And it does affect, obviously, one thing, and I think intuitively we know that as well, our eyesight, because obviously research finding has suggested that constant nail work and also the lack of maybe exposure to the sun because of the nail work is going to increase our risk of developing well, I guess short-sightedness, right? Or in short, myopia. And then that's probably the reason why, I guess, in Singapore, the rates of myopias are like almost through the roof. It's like 80 or 90%, as compared to, say, maybe a place where, in Australia, where they encourage a lot of like sort of outdoors or outdoor plays and so on. And also the internet connection is not like fantastic compared to, like, say, in Singapore, we got like really fast like Wi-Fi. In fact, it's, I think, one of the fastest, and I think the top 5 fastest in the world. So I think people are more induced to want to go out to sort of, I guess, engage in other activities. And so the myopia rates are sort of under 20%, for instance. So because there's this mismatch with looking at things on the screen in terms of like the physical sort of impact, but there's also this impact about what you are looking at on the screen as well. So for instance, if you're watching sort of a Netflix sort of movie, say on like, say, Wonder Woman, Superman, they usually look a certain way, right? So they don't usually look like me, for instance, right? Like you don't see me like being Superman or something like that. So usually they look a certain way, but usually those sort of actresses, they are not representative of the average population, right? They are the outlier, or they might be so different, isn't it? Like in terms of like their appearance, in terms of maybe the height or whatever it is. But because we have evolved to treat people that we see in our community as part of the community, although we know cognitively that, okay, this is, well, I mean, this is like, I don't know, Wonder Woman. This is not like Tom Hanks or whoever it is, like a Taylor Swift. Sorry, like kind of forgot the name for now. Pardon me if you are a fan of her. Say for instance, like you might be looking at her or him, or for instance, or are they, right? So you might be thinking, okay, I know they are not part of my community, but at the same time, our psychological mechanism is responding to them as if they were part of the community. And so we judge ourselves based on that standard. And that is why there are research studies suggesting that people experience a lot of psychological ill health because of that. Like people, there's a huge increase in terms of eating disorders. In fact, they found that when they introduced like television in a population of Fijians, like in Fiji, in a rural population where in the past they did not really have access to like television and so on and so forth, there's a huge increase in symptoms of eating disorder because of people looking at all these attractive actors and actresses, and they're judging themselves based on that kind of extreme standards. And the other problem is also with social media. Then I would like to introduce you to this concept called dumb bus number. It's a concept popularized by this researcher in Oxford, where there's a sort of empirical support to suggest that this number is true. So what is this number? So he found that on average across prehistoric society and across all modern day society, there's always this number 150. So what is this 150? So he suggested that, and he found that across different studies as well, every one of us are evolved to only handle about 150 people in our lifetime. So that includes your family, your partner, your good friends, your relatives, your acquaintances, your colleagues, and so on. So 150. So you might think it's a big number, but if you try to count everybody, it's not a big number. So there's always this 5, 15, 50, 150. So the 5 are the people who are closest to you. Those people who you want to maybe ask, if you want to ask for a $10,000 loan or something, there's probably these five people. And then these 15 people who are really close to you as well. And and there's also these 50 who are somewhat close, not too close, but they are kind of maybe some of your good friends, but you don't always see them regularly. And also this 150, it constitute maybe your colleagues, some or other acquaintances. But compare this number with the friends we have got on like social media, right? So we probably have like a lot of us, like we'll have like 1,000 friends or 2,000 friends or something like that, right? So in that sense, that's kind of a mismatch between what we're evolved to handle and the kind of networks we have got on social media. And that poses a problem because on one hand, we will find that there is a lack of sort of, I guess, bond that we have with people. And then you might think that another person is doing better than you because they have got so many friends and they seem to be doing that well, better than you, because you don't feel this connection with maybe the 900 friends you have got on Facebook or whatever it is, but maybe we just with another about 50 or so, but you might think your friends are doing better than you. And in relation to that, on social media, because it's a very different sort of social network as compared to the prehistoric past, where we actually see everybody pretty much every day. We know your successes, we know your failures, we know what you have been doing, we know you have tripped over and fell down just now and it was embarrassing, but you didn't post it on social media, right? So maybe or you did, right? But what I'm trying to get at is like on social media, we tend to only introduce like a subset of our life and a certain image of our life. But we are evolved to handle those information as if they represent all your life. So we then compare ourselves to our friends and the 900 friends, right? And on social media, then we then feel less happy with ourselves. And in research finding this suggests that there's this increase in Facebook's of depression among people, especially if you're viewing positive images of your friends, of people on your network. At the same time, obviously, there's a marked increase in terms of symptoms of like mood and anxiety as well, when people tend to sort of compare themselves, especially on upward comparison, not in the downward comparison. So you compare yourself with those friends who are doing better. Like maybe there's one of your friends who posted an image on himself enjoying Hawaii. Now, given that we are in a pandemic, it's like, oh, but I'm enjoying Hawaii. You'll be like, how sad my life is, or something like so. But we do not know the story, the underlying story of it. So that is evolution mismatch factor in this, and it's more pronounced in urbanized world because more of us are using social media and obviously looking at the screen than say people in a rural area. The next one is, how much nature do you usually encounter in your life? And how about the number of strangers when you are outdoors? Do you encounter a lot of some nature? As indicated just now, we have evolved to look at those environment like this rather than this. And because we have evolved this tendency to sort of use this, there's a theory as well called unsolved problem hypothesis, where the natural environment actually allows you to sort of take a time, kind of like take a time off from your existential sort of problems, your issues, and maybe, I guess, look at it from a different perspective. And that is why maybe you hear a lot of people saying that, oh, I managed to sort of solve this issue after taking a walk in a park or things like that. So the natural environment, if it's safe, right? A park looks safe, right? So if it's safe, it's not filled with like lions roaming around. People tend to use those kind of environment, and we are evolved to do that, use those environments to sort of recharge and to obviously then, I guess, address a lot of maybe stresses in our life. However, on the other hand, if we're exposed to this kind of scene constantly, say you're on train or maybe like say on Orchard Road, for instance, we tend to feel more stressed. And research finding has suggested that people tend to then, there's an increase in people's stress level, and then they tends to, if you are a smoker, then you tend to then smoke more because you feel more stressed with strangers walking around you. The reason is also because from evolution perspective, strangers usually tend to pose a danger to you. Of course, we know that in, say, many modern cities, like for instance in Singapore, is very safe, right? So we cognitively know that, oh, it's somewhat safe, but at the same time, the emotional responses will still respond quite differently. So I think one good example would be that if you ask yourself whether will you feel less uncomfortable if you are standing closer to your friends or your family as opposed to say maybe a stranger, I think the answer is yes. The reason is because obviously we don't know what stranger is going to do. We have evolved this tendency to be fearful. It's an adaptive sort of tendency. But because then we in the urbanized world, we tend to see then a lot of strangers, then we are always responding to this constant, maybe however mild threat that the environment might be posing to us. And so research finding this suggests that there's a lot of physical and psychological issues that might, I guess, arise because of that. Not just with the stress level, but in terms of even in terms of like maybe anxiety symptoms as well, and also even physical ones as well. Obviously, there are some studies suggesting that in more densely populated sort of environment, that there's a higher likelihood of the spread of infectious diseases like COVID-19. Or obviously, there are some studies that challenges that, but in general, it seems to be the case. And also in sort of more urbanized world, there's obviously with less trees, people are going to suffer more respiratory sort of conditions because the trees are not be able to sort of remove the pollutants in the environment. And also, is there sort of too much traffic noise or bright light at night in the place where you live? Or how about the air quality? I guess we can really relate to this, right? So I think a few years ago, there was like the haze in Singapore. And obviously, if you live close to the sort of busy expressway, you probably hear the sounds from traffic. And maybe if you're close to one of the sort of the airports, you probably hear the planes flying around. And if you're close to maybe the city area, you probably have the bright lights shining through your window. And these are sort of like pollution, different types of pollution. And it has been found to be more prominent in urban places as compared to rural places. And research finding has suggested a whole host of physical and sort of mental health outcomes in terms of sleep, especially if you are exposed to bright light at night. And also in terms of health outcome, even say with the light at night, research finding has suggested that there's is going to increase your risk of developing certain types of cancer, like breast cancer and prostate cancer. And also with the type of pollution, they're going to noise and air pollution, right? So they're going to increase your stress level. And with air pollution, they're going to increase your risk of developing respiratory condition, stroke, cardiovascular condition, and so on. Similarly with traffic noise as well, they're going to obviously affect your mental well-being as well and your sleep. So because these are the things that are not common in our prehistoric past, right? So we were responding as if there's a constant threat, because in the prehistoric past, if you think about it, if you hear a loud noise, if you smell something different, chances are it's a fire burning, or maybe a lion coming towards you, or an elephant charging towards you. You'll be alert, right? You are just responding a threat. Or like light and night. I mean, prior to the invention of artificial light, we don't really, humans do not really have light and night. So we are responding to those like novel sort of events as if they were like threats to us. But obviously in the modern urbanized world, they were not threats, but I guess that's how this mismatch can sort of come into play and affect our well-being. So then you might be wondering, is it all doom and gloom? Or I mean, talking about all this adverse health effect on us, is it all doom and gloom? Not really, because there are some benefits to living in an urbanized world as well, evolutionary novel benefits. Say, for instance, if you think about modern invention, I mean, the fact that we invented, say, cars, it allows us to travel to one place to another very efficiently. Say, for instance, if you need to see a doctor, all you need to do is just drive, right? Isn't it? Along, like, say, PIE or whatever it is, and you reach the hospital in no time. But without the invention, modern invention, like in urbanized world, if you're going to travel, like, say, maybe using or by foot, for instance, you probably would die by the time you reach the hospital. Similarly with other inventions like heaters, if you're living in a cold country, or an air conditioner. I say, for instance, if there's a heat wave tomorrow, like hitting Singapore, like 50 degrees Celsius, if you've got an air conditioning, chances are you're going to survive rather than not if you do not have air conditioning. So there are things that are actually beneficial. In fact, despite the fact they are evolutionary novel. And vaccine will be one very good example as well. Obviously, we know that now with the vaccine, there are the ways to trick the body to think that there's a real infection when it's not a real infection, but then the body is responding by activating our immune system, right? So it's an evolutionary novel invention, but at the same time, it's beneficial because our body has not yet evolved to sort of treat that differently. So it's actually helpful for us in terms of reducing a health risk. Similarly with facilities as well. We have got like in urbanized world, we have got better equipped hospital, roads, and so on and so forth. So we are more equipped to sort of, I guess, enhance our health and maybe save lives and even improve our health as well. Without maybe service roads, and for instance, in rural areas, for instance, chances are you're not going to get to the hospital in time, for instance, right? So there are benefits with those evolutionary novel encounters in urbanized world. So, but you might ask then, what if those less positive risks are present in our world? Like, so regardless of those benefits, what if those things that I've talked about previously are present in my world? Are there things that I can do? There are some possible strategies. I wouldn't say, obviously, it's comprehensive, of course, right? There are some possible strategies. So one way is that because of an evolution perspective, the kin, like your relatives, your family, are the people who are more likely to help you than not, all else being equal, right? So it might be really useful to connect or reconnect with your kin, right? So if you have some conflict with them, maybe it might be useful to connect with them again, because it's going to be good for your well-being as well. And also maybe perhaps you want to maybe like stay with some of them or get some of them to stay with you, maybe improve your well-being as well. So that might be something to think about. And also another strategy would be to rethink certain social networks. So given the Dunbar's number, maybe you want to maybe invest less time with groups that might be out of the 150, perhaps, because you're not going to have enough resources and time to invest in those relationships anyway. And it might actually feel better without getting this image, say, from Peter telling you about how he's enjoying himself in Hawaii when you don't hardly know him about his life as well. So we want to rethink certain social networks. And also maybe you want to ditch the app that maybe, I'm not sure, like a food delivery app, and do more home cooking, given that home food tends to be healthier than online delivery food. Or maybe just a mindset change, really. Maybe if you want to do like online delivery, like a food delivered online, and maybe order those food that are more nutritious, perhaps. And also this idea about positive competition, because humans have evolved to be more concerned about relative standing than absolute standing. So we are more concerned about how we stand in relation to our friends on the hierarchy, so to speak, rather than our absolute standing. So maybe we can, I guess, harness the kind of psychological, I guess, tendency to maybe induce people to say exercise more. So you have this bit of like positive competition with your friends, say who exercise more per day or who eat more healthier food per day or something. So that might induce some behavioral changes as well, positive ones. There are some others will be like maybe incorporate more indoor nature. And research finding has shown that people will have like posters of nature, they will improve their well-being, indoor plants, and even something unique as this like artificial skylight is a modern invention invented recently, that you have this skylight in your ceiling that mimics the real sort of sky that you have got, and it is shown to enhance people's sort of emotional well-being. So you might want to consider something like that. And I'm not affiliated with whatever company that's selling this, just to be sure. And maybe you want to go to a less crowded area where possible. I know it's not maybe always possible in Singapore, right? But where possible, perhaps. And lastly, also use like dimmer radar light, because the research work has suggested that radar light tends to inhibit the sort of the melatonin less, like, right, as opposed to like blue light and white lights, for instance, right? So you're less likely to then be affected in terms of your sleep. So maybe a radar light at night might be actually helpful. So I'll end off with this sort of quote as saying that you want to do it for a family or potential future generation. The reason why I say this is that because from an evolution perspective, people are more likely to want to adopt certain behavioral changes in their life because they're doing it for their family. Because a study that we have conducted recently actually as well has shown that across all countries, people tend to be motivated to do something for their family more so than other things. So if I have a health message like this, do it for your family or potential future generation, you'll be more likely to want to adopt those strategies. Okay, so I hope today you have some brief understanding of what evolution mismatch is about, appreciate how it might affect our lives from micro to the macro aspect of our life, and understand some ways to maybe mitigate some of the impact, and maybe keep the positive bits so it's not all doom and gloom, at least, right? So we know there are some benefits to living in an urban world as well. So these are the references for my talk, and I'll leave you with a view of Hawaii. So maybe you will feel better looking at it. And thank you for listening. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the talk, OJ. So the time now is 4:20. I think we have about 10 minutes for question and answer, like questions and answer. So so let me start with a couple of comments from the audience. So during the talk, there were actually a couple of comments that came in. And so so essentially, the comment is that, to what extent could some people even embrace, rather than eschew from, the hustle and bustle of urban living, right? So, I mean, so in other words, like, could some people actually find comfort in the busyness of urban living, right? And so I guess a related question to that is, to what extent could people's response, to urbanization depend on a certain personality or individual differences, such as, whether they are introvert or extrovert and so on. Yeah.
Well, definitely. Like, thank you for that question. It's really useful. I think this is something that has been, I guess, suggested, especially in the last year or so, because we were all sort of like in the lockdown, and people were talking about like personality traits as well, like so being introvert and extrovert and being locked down. And obviously, there's some suggestions saying that the introverts are doing better in a lockdown than extroverts, then because you feel more comfortable like being in a sort of home environment rather than maybe an extrovert who, I guess, crave the kind of interactions. So to try to answer the first question is, yes, there are individual variation. In fact, studies have found in environmental psychology, there are individual differences in terms of how comfortable people are. And there were some reports suggesting that some people, they are more comfortable with the urban world than other people. So my sister is one good example. She likes like the urban living more so than so that is sort of individual sort of differences, definitely, with because there are variation in terms of how we all live, right? So in terms of different adaptability, so some people, yes, they probably adapt sort of easier to solve the differences in environment, and intelligence is one way to sort of deal with it. So the intelligence is I guess an indicator of how creative we can, maybe change our environment to make it more of a match rather than a mismatch. So those people who prefer those kind of urban living, perhaps I would hazard a guess that they have, I guess, modified their place, their living environment to the extent that it's still more in line with our evolved tendency. Perhaps, like, I mean, they might be living in an urban world, but they might have, say, a garden, or they might have like plants, or they might have, maybe they have some sort of, in terms of how they organize their social lives as well. So yes, indeed. So to answer that question, yes, individual variation. But at the same time, I'll be interested to see how they modify their lifestyle to maybe make it more of a fit, maybe in that sense. Hopefully that sort of answer that question.
That's great, OJ. So another comment or question, just came in while you were addressing the earlier comment, and I think this could be related to what you just said. In fact, so essentially, Madhu would like to know whether you think that blending nature with urban living, just like what Singapore has been doing, is actually a step in the right direction, right? So is this a way that we could do to lessen evolutionary mismatch?
Yeah, thanks for the comments, Madhu. Yes, indeed, that is exactly what it is. From what I understand as well from some sort of colleagues in sort of in architecture as well, like so even working in Singapore, that they came even from the mindset of like they call it the biophilic sort of a perspective. So meaning that they actually sort of change their physical urban lifestyle to suit more as to what we are comfortable with. And there are some, I'm not an architect, but what I understand from research finding is that that is way to sort of design buildings. You might have seen those buildings as well in Singapore, where they actually design in a way that suits our evolved tendencies. So there's this concept called prospect and refuge. This theory in environmental sort of psychology called prospect and refuge. So prospect meaning people are comfortable, we are evolved to be comfortable with an environment where we can see prospect like in front of us in a distance. And then refuge meaning where we can still, while at the same time looking what's in front of us, have a place where we feel comfortable, like we have our social spaces. One place I would think of, obviously I will have to ask my colleagues in architect. I mean, I'm not an architect, but I hazard a guess, like for instance, it will be Vivo City will be one place where you have those kind of like environment where you can actually see in the distance. And then you have a place to sort of like hide, so to speak, as you would like to say. And Terminal 3 will be another example as well, where you get a tall ceiling, where you feel comfortable with that tall ceiling. So when people are sort of, they have those sort of ceiling in them, then they feel uncomfortable. And at the same time, as what Madhu has suggested, with that inclusion of natural spaces and environment, that's the definitely the way to go, because research finding has suggested that people tend to then feel better. There's a greater community feel, they exercise more, they feel more comfortable and improving psychological well-being when there's more nature and more parks in Singapore. So that is definitely a way to harness it without actually going back to living that kind of life. We don't want to live in the jungle as well, right? But at the same time, we want to modify a place that's more evolutionary natural to us as well. Hopefully that answers the question.
Thanks, OJ. Okay, so a couple of additional questions. So one of the questions that just came in from S. Young is, so based on these argument of evolutionary mismatch, right? So one would expect people living in rural areas to actually have less mismatch, and therefore they should presumably be healthier. However, statistics have also shown that people who actually live in urban areas tend to have better health. So how might you explain these apparent paradox, right? So that's one of the questions that just came in.
Indeed, thank you for the question. Indeed, that is the finding, exactly. That is the finding that a lot of people have found. And in fact, obviously there are some variation in terms of the empirical findings in literature, but indeed, one of the explanations is because despite the fact that we are looking at the disparity between like sort of urban world and rural areas, the idea, the notion is that in the modern context, in the 21st century, even a rural area is not that similar to the kind of the natural environment that our ancestors were used to anymore. Because in a lot of rural areas, there are a lot of evolutionary sort of mismatch factors as well. So such as people were, they were found that people were actually, they have sort of access to sort of like food as well. They have even sort of like they change the environments such that there isn't a lot of like sort of physical activities anymore. So people were also like incorporating a lot of like sort of urbanized sort of lifestyle into like the community. So it becomes a very more similar to like sort of urbanized world than a rural sort of like that the kind of natural environment that we're used to. And also on the other hand, as indicated just now, in the urban world, the health impact for certain aspect at least actually better for people, because as I indicated earlier, like we have better resource hospital. In a rural area, it's kind of hard to find a doctor, for instance, or like access to nurses. It's a big issue here in Wales as well. So with rural population, they can't really access like even a doctor. They have to travel like several hundred, like maybe 100 kilometers to access a doctor. So they might just delay maybe treatment like for certain maybe mild ailments, but then it might then maybe transform into something serious. So those things, they are not really readily available in sort of rural areas. Like, so despite the fact that we might have those lifestyle that we have incorporated from the rural environment, but we have those lack of resources, like lack of proper roads, hospital, and so on and so forth. So yes, so that exactly that kind of maybe, I guess, explain the disparity or the conflict really. So hopefully that sort of answered the question.
Right, thank you. So we actually have about 1 minute left. So I'm just going to go ahead and ask one more question, and then for the rest of the comments and questions that came in, so we'll forward them to OJ, and perhaps like OJ could address them offline, right? Okay, so a very quick question from Ying Shang Lao, which I think is a very interesting question, given these like growth in technological advancements and adoption recently, right? So what are your thoughts about us, living with robots and AI?
Well, I would say that's a really sort of an interesting question. Well, I guess it all depends on how sort of, I guess, natural the robots are, perhaps, right? So if the robots are going to maybe behave just like, I'm not sure, obviously, the technological advances are not there yet, right? But if the robots are going to behave exactly like another human being, able to form relationship, able to have those emotional sort of responses, able to react just like another human being, perhaps like we could manage it just as well, because we could respond as if it's a real person. But if the robot are very sort of unnatural, then maybe that you will still find that sort of like a, I guess, mismatch or something, I guess, missing in your life, right? So like if you get a robot as your friend, for instance, the robot is going to be quite robotic in the sense of like not going to respond to you as a sort of a human being, right? But I mean, it all depends on technological advance. I would say, like, if it's very technological advanced, then maybe I'll say, but nobody knows the answer, to be honest. Like we probably have to go to the future to find out. But a very interesting question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, OJ. So on that note, I would just like to, on behalf of all the participants in today's lecture, I just want to thank OJ again for sharing his talk with us. And so I also want to wish everyone have a good rest of the day, and please take care. Okay.
Thanks a lot for listening as well. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.